Welcome back to the Reviving Christian Families podcast. This is Micaiah, and today we're going to be talking about why you're so exhausted, what a trauma response is, and how this has a toll on the body. So let's dive in. Hey spouses, I know what it's like to be frazzled, overwhelmed, and stressed while managing all the tasks, balancing work schedules, raising children, and trying to grow closer to each other and the Lord. All the trauma and the shame cycles you can't seem to break out of are just the cherry on top, right? You know that you want to make a change, that you need something to be different, and you crave a happier, healthier lifestyle, but you don't know where to start, how to get there, and you just feel stuck. That's why I'm here showing up every week with these podcast episodes to give you the knowledge and momentum you need to get unstuck and begin healing the generational trauma in your family. Let's take off those trauma patterns and the lies of the enemy and put on the armor and strength of the Lord. We are building a better future for the next generation and every generation to come. And the healing for the next generations begins with us. So wives, grab your husband, and husbands, grab your wife a snack, and let's dive in and do the work. All right, so today we're going to talk about some of the consequences, you could say, of dealing with trauma and what that shows up as in the body. And so we're looking at the trauma survivor's experience, and we're going to be talking about stuff like chronic exhaustion, how trauma affects the nervous system, body, and mind. And so just diving in here, the first thing we're going to go over are some of the physiological reasons for exhaustion. So this is going to be like nervous system dysregulation, hypervigilance. If you don't know, hypervigilance is a state of like excessive alertness and heightened awareness of potential threats or dangers. So some signs that you might be hypervigilant or have this issue of being in a state of hypervigilance could be that you're constantly scanning the environment. You constantly feel on guard and like you have to be looking for potential threats around you. You have an increased sensitivity to stimuli, so you may have an exaggerated response to sounds, sights, or smells that other people might not notice or think is a big deal. Another sign would be that you might have a difficulty relaxing. You may constantly feel like tense, unsafe, and it could be like all the time or maybe just in like certain circumstances. And then anxiety and fear is a sign of this as well. Even if you're in a situation that's not like obviously physically dangerous, but you still feel like that panicky feeling of like something's wrong. Another one would be hyperactivity. So you might feel restless, easily startled, or maybe you have like difficulty concentrating or sitting still. And so then we go into our next point here. So we're getting out of hypervigilance and we're going to talk about nervous system dysregulation now. And this is when the nervous system is overstressed or overwhelmed, and it causes an imbalance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, which can lead to a range of physical, psychological, and cognitive symptoms. So what does that look like? That could look like headaches, chronic pain, muscle tension, insomnia, weakened immune systems, bladder and stomach issues, seizures, partial paralysis, like on the very extreme end. Some psychological symptoms of that might be anxiety, depression, mood swings, irritability, and like a pervasive, like constant sense of depletion, like just exhausted, drained, don't have anything left to give. So some things that might come along with that would be like memory problems, difficulty concentrating again, being easily overwhelmed or oversensitive to stimuli. Um, and what are some of the things that could cause this? That would be, a whole range of traumas, but just to list some, it could be birth trauma if you had like a traumatic event giving birth to a child. That could look like physical injuries. Maybe it was just as simple as getting a concussion. Infections, chronic stress. So if you're like consistently living a stressed out lifestyle and your body never has time to recover, that could cause it. Exposure to toxins. So if you're living a very toxic overload life, which most of America is right now, so that's wouldn't be a big surprise by any means. Another thing could be poor dietary choices, like maybe you're not eating the right things to fuel your body, but then this also connects to the toxins because there's certain things that help us detox our body and get rid of those things that are hurting our body. And so if we're not eating enough of those things and letting our body detox, then that could be a problem too. And then lack of physical activity. So if you live a very sedentary life where you're not moving very much and your body's not getting that exercise and strength building and just even walking, like they show walking is a huge for your metabolism. Even just like walking, I think it was 4,000 steps a day is like huge. If you look at the studies, it had a huge effect on people. And that's not even close to the 10,000 mark that people recommend. So like even just starting around that 4,000 mark and trying to build your way up could be huge. And so a few other things here would be not enough sleep, if you have a substance abuse problem. And so some of the ways that you could go about trying to improve this or treat it would be cold water therapy. People get like those big tubs and they do like the cold plunges. You could do this in a normal bathtub. You could take a cold shower. Even taking warm baths might help. I'm not sure what exactly the cold versus the warm water does, but two different things there. Anyways, so the limbic retraining. Jeez, that was hard for me to get out for some reason. Um, uh, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure what all that entails. You would have to look it up or get a specialist to help you through that. And then there's reducing gut inflammation with diet and probiotics. So, like making sure you're not eating foods that are going to inflame you. So, a lot of that in our diet right now is vegetable oils. They are very terrible for you and they cause inflammation and they also kill your hunger hormone. So, if you have not cut out seed oils yet, I highly recommend that you do. And there's some 50-50 with some of the oils. Like, for example, olive oil is technically not seed oil, but a lot of them are mixed with seed oil. So you kind of have to be aware of that stuff and do your research. I personally just like to stick to butter or ghee or tallow, that type of stuff when I pick products, but do your own research and decide what's best for you. And also with probiotics, I always recommend that you do your own research if you're going to supplement, because a lot of the supplements and things, they are kind of scammy, honestly. Like, they will have stuff added into them that's actually terrible for you. Some of them even have vegetable oil added into them. And then you have the other side of it where some of them are just like literally nonsense. Like maybe it's a little piece of one strand of probiotic and they're going to charge you $50 for it. Like, so you really have to like look out and do your research, because obviously you want to get a supplement that's actually going to help you, not hurt you more or just be a waste of your money. So just like all things, just do your research. So anyways, another thing in there is Probiotic supplements are great, but really just adding in probiotic foods is going to help you as well, and making sure that you are eating those things first thing and like regularly incorporating them into your diet. So I like to have some kefir or some pickles or some sauerkraut first thing in the morning. Even though it sounds weird, it sounds kind of gross. Usually I go with the kefir because it feels more breakfasty to like do a. It's, if you don't know, kefir's like a yogurt drink technically, is what it kind of is, and so it it is a little more sugary. Unless you make your own, then you can control the sugar content, but like the ones from the store are a little more sugary than what would be ideal for trying to get probiotics in your gut. But if that's what you can tolerate, then it's still a good option. And it's better than starting your day with like bread or something, or just drinking your coffee. Especially if you're having a coffee that's not organic, shade grown coffee. Um, because most likely there could be pesticides, mold, I mean, all kinds of toxins in um, some of the coffees. So you just gotta try to put good stuff in your gut first thing in the morning, so that then, yes, you should eat good after that, but then after that, whatever you eat, your gut's gonna be more equipped to handle it. So hopefully that makes sense. And we kind of talked about this before, and it's definitely in my anxiety audio training and workbook. I know because I talked about fasting in there, and I also talked about gut health in there a lot, because your gut health and yeah, your gut health is really heavily tied to your mental health because there is receptors in your gut. So I talked about all that in my anxiety audio training. So if you like are curious about that, go get it. I will link it in the show notes below. And even if you have like depression, or you don't necessarily feel like you have anxiety, even if you have like anger, you feel like you have anger issues, it could all be tied back to anxiety, honestly. And so all these things are really connected. So I really should just call it the mental health audio in workbook, because that's kind of what it is. But I did it a little more geared towards anxiety specifically because I saw that issue showing up a lot around me. And so I wanted to address that issue specifically. But it would be helpful for any of you struggling with your mental health in any way. So please go get that if that is something you feel like would be helpful for you, and actually like give it time, like actually listen to the audios, actually take time to work through the workbook. If you like to write, print it off. And there is a like digital version where you can, type it out, but honestly I find that it sticks better in my brain when I write it. So I recommend that you do write it. And even if you don't have a printer, most libraries print for like really cheap. Like I know our library prints like $10, not $10, 10 cents a page if it's black and white. So and it's like 25 cents a page if it's in color. So it's really not that expensive. I would really recommend that you guys just print it off and go through it. So yeah, that was a little tangent back into what we were talking about here. So the next thing I want to talk about is how emotional labor and muscle tension can drain your energy. So for me, this was really important for me to put in here because I've noticed that I carry a lot of stress in my body sometimes. And if I'm not very aware of it, like it will cause me to just be miserable. So I'll get like really tense in my neck and my shoulders. And sometimes it even goes up into my jaw. Like I will clench my jaw out of like, I don't know what it is. I don't know why I do it. But it'll be like from whatever tension or stress I'm experiencing, I'll get like this clenched feeling in my jaw, and it'll be hard for me to let go. Like you would think that you would be able to just unclench your jaw, but like it's so tense that I'll feel like I don't know how to relax in that moment, especially if I'm in a stressful like social encounter or around people and I feel like I can't necessarily just like relax and be myself. That's when this occurs the most. And I don't know if it's like a trigger in me or what, but it becomes very stressful. So I don't know. I figured if I'm going through this, there's probably other people out here who are experiencing these day-to-day aches and pains and stressful moments, and they just think like, oh, either there's something wrong with me, like I'm unhealthy, or like they think, I don't know, it's just a coincidence. But I just want you guys to know that this stuff could be related to your trauma. It could be stress, and emotional stuff that you're harboring in your body. And later in this trauma series, we are going to talk more about how the body holds trauma. And I'm going to talk about my experience reading through the book, The Body Keeps the Score. So if you want to go get that book and read it, and then we can talk about it in the upcoming episode. Not the next episode after this, but it's one of the episodes coming up a little later in the series. So if you want to read the book, I would highly recommend that, so that when we get to that episode, you're prepared and you'll know what I'm talking about. But if you don't want to read it, that's totally fine, because I'm going to give the overview and kind of catch you guys up to speed who haven't read it. And the whole point is that I'm going to overarch it so that if you don't want to read it or you don't have time to read it, you won't have to, because I'm going to kind of summarize it for you. So, jumping back in, so some examples of this beyond what I just explained would be effortful emotional regulation. So, emotional labor, which involves managing and regulating your emotions to meet the demands of your role or situation. This continuous effort can be mentally taxing and depleting. So if you're in a situation essentially where you feel like it's very tense, or it feels very awkward, or maybe you're in a situation where someone is displaying very big emotions to you, like strong anger or strong disappointment. Someone's really sad. If you're in one of those situations, you maybe don't know how to handle it, or you're feeling big emotions inside, but you know you can't display them outside. Like, those type of situations are what we would be talking about here, where you are feeling like this constant need to be regulating your emotions, like very intentionally, like you're holding it back, you're controlling what you say, you're controlling, trying to control how you feel, right? And so that would be a emotionally taxing situation where you could see this problem flare up of like it draining your energy. And then another situation could be a big mental load. So if you're suppressing emotions, or expressing emotions that are not like true to how you're feeling, this it takes up a lot of your mental energy. Like, it actually drains you to lie or to hide things, because your brain knows when you're not telling the truth. Like, it knows the truth. And so if you are trying to express something that's not true or hide something that is true, it'll kind of start to show up in your body language too, and it could start to make you look awkward. And people pick up on body language very easily, like naturally, so they might not be able to verbally express that something, like what exactly was off. Like, they might not be able to verbally express like, oh, they were lying to me. They'll still get that sense of like, oh, something was weird there, like that didn't feel good, like there's something off. So people naturally do that. And so that's when we can get into these issues if, like, maybe you weren't lying, but you have something like uncomfortable within yourself. So maybe you're just uncomfortable because your clothes aren't fitting right that day, or you're bloated, or your stomach hurts. That could display to other people through your body language that you're uncomfortable, and then they would assume that you're uncomfortable because of them. So that's an example. And that's something that I've been learning through this book called the goodness, I just forgot the name of it. It's about charisma. I think it's called, like, no, I'm not even gonna try to guess because I'll get it wrong. But it's a book about charisma and how to have charisma, and just kind of teaching you that, like, charisma is not something you're either born with or just you can't ever have. It's actually a learned behavior. And so I started reading through that because I always had a fixed mindset about like being a people person. And I always thought, oh, I'm just not a people person. I'm introverted. That's just how I am. And then when I realized that that was a fixed mindset and I can change that, now I've been working towards like becoming a little more of a people person and enjoying being around people. And so, like, initially, that was very uncomfortable in certain situations. Like, when I started working 1 day a week in the salon again, like, that was a little uncomfortable because went from being home most days to, and not really having to get out for full days to, like, I spend the whole day every week in the salon around people constantly. And so it definitely pushed me on my comfort zone, but I am adjusting. Like every week, I feel myself getting a little more comfortable and doing a little better. So that's just an example from my own life. Anyways, let's move on to the next point here now that we've kind of touched on those things. Um, this is emotional exhaustion. So if emotional demands are just really high and like it stays that way, like they stay high for an extended period of time, that can lead to emotional exhaustion and just a state of being emotionally drained and depleted, which seems to be a recurring theme here, right? And so we kind of talked about emotional exhaustion because it is kind of tied into the other things, but I just wanted to give it its own category because sometimes that happens without the other things, like even just when we're dealing with toddlers, because toddlers are very emotional and they have big emotions, and it can be emotionally draining to have those big emotions thrown at you and then not be able to reflect them to your child, right? We try not to. We try to not be as angry or as sad as our child is. We want to be that strong, supportive, safe caregiver for them and show them how to regulate their emotions. And so that's why it's so important that we learn how to regulate our emotions, because if we don't learn how to do it ourselves, we can't teach them, obviously. So that's kind of been a journey for me, I know, and I'm sure probably for some of you out there, you're like, yeah, I don't even know if I've really learned how to do that yet, even for myself. And so, like, no shame if you are in that place, because I get it. It is hard to learn that when you were never taught, and now, like, you're in the situation where you're like, oh, I need to learn this because I have to teach it. And so that is a little bit of like a stressful place to be in. But if we flip the script and we look at it the other way, it's also a very blessed place to be in, because now we can't make any more excuses. Like, we just have to do the work. And so if you need help doing the work, that's why I'm here. That's why I created the Facebook group. And that's why I'm giving away free one-on-one Voxer coaching days right now for a limited time. So if you're listening to this in real time, and it's 2025 for you when you're listening to this, then you should probably reach out to me if you need that help, because I've put the resources there for you to be able to get it. And so I'm here, guys. It's not just so I can get you on a sleazy sales call. I swear that's not what this is about. This is about helping you while also growing my coaching skills, and so it ends up being a win-win situation. So jumping back in here, I keep getting off on side tangents. Sorry, guys. Okay. Reduced self. Oh gosh, I'm gonna say this wrong. This word wrong. Efficacy. There we go. Feeling inauthentic and constantly expressing emotions can make you feel like you're inadequate, and it can hurt your self-esteem, essentially. I don't know why I used the big word when I could just use the simple terminology, but it drains your energy, right? If you don't feel like you're confident in yourself because you feel like you're suppressing emotions from trauma or things that have happened to you, or maybe like you have family members around you still who are like, we just don't, oops, sorry guys. You have maybe you were in that spot like I was. So growing up, my family was like, we just don't talk about it. And I'm not a just don't talk about it person, okay? That's not who I am. I'm a let's talk about it, work through it, make it better, and move on. And if you were just don't talk about it, that'll drive me crazy, because I feel like if we don't talk about it, we can't get through it. I'm a talk through it person. And so that didn't work for me. And that led to me cutting a lot of my family off because I'm just not that way, and I can't pretend around people that I am that way. I'm not going to know all this stuff and keep it bottled up in my head and feel like it's this giant elephant in the room. I would rather spank the elephant and make it run. Like, I don't want to just stand there with the elephant in the room. Now, I don't recommend spanking an elephant. After I said it, I realized that that sounds actually terrifying to have an elephant, trampeding, or is that the word? Jeez. I don't know when I started not being able to talk, guys. It'll come to me. And then by the time the word comes to me, I won't need it anymore. But, anyways, so, okay. I think you guys get that one. It hurts our self esteem, which then drains our energy. I think we all know that when we wake up on those days feeling a little ickier than usual, you know, um, maybe you're getting to that point where you saw a gray hair. I don't know. I actually saw my first gray hair before I graduated high school, so which that's okay if you don't believe me. It sounds nuts, but I swear I did. I was in cosmetology school in my probably senior year, and I found a gray hair. And yeah, I ripped it out. My teacher was like, it's gonna grow back gray, right? But I haven't been able to find it since, so maybe I imagined it. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure it was really there. Anyway, so um physical the physical side of this, so the signs of stress showing up physically, that can be like muscle tension. And for me, like I said, that's in my neck and my shoulders a lot. And so sometimes I feel like, so tense, and then it leads to a tension headache. And other symptoms, like sometimes I can feel it down into my back if it's like getting really bad that day. So just start like noticing how are those things showing up physically for you, because it will be a little different for everyone. But I think that the shoulders is a pretty common place that I notice in people. So you might be asking, why does that happen? And the answer to that question is because when you are in a state of stress, your body releases the stress hormone, and that can actually be the cause of the muscle tension, and the tightness is actually from the hormone itself. So, um, I don't know if that'll necessarily help you, but I think it helps me sometimes to just understand, why am I experiencing this? Like, what is actually going on in my body? So, um, some things that can make that better is like maybe taking a warm bath, or maybe you want to try cold plunging, but I feel like that could um, make it worse for some people. So you might have to like try warm versus cold, what actually helps you the most. And obviously you can try other things like essential oil, or just laying down for a second and doing like the exercise where you do deep breaths and kind of like relax into the bed. Like I like to think about it like as if I'm melting into the bed, or like falling into the bed. So that's something that I learned from like sleep meditations I used to do when I couldn't sleep. So you could give that a try. And yeah, the other thing that goes along with this is that when you're in that state of tension, it's actually depleting your energy resources more. So I'm sure you can kind of see how this is full circle here. Like, you're exhausted, you're stressed, your body sends a stress hormone, which makes you tense, which then depletes your energy more because it's taking a constant energy to keep you tense, and then which makes you more exhausted, which leads to more physical fatigue. Um, and discomfort, and then it hinders your ability to participate in activities and perform at your best, and then that could have an impact on your sleep. um, and so if you're feeling tense and stressed and all that icky feelings, that can make it so you can't sleep at night, which then makes it so you wake up with low energy again. And so essentially what we're saying here is it's kind of a circle effect, and if you don't break the circle, you don't break the cycle, then as you can see, that leads to very bad things. And I've even seen this in people I love, like lead to heart issues and, like other health issues because they didn't break their chronic cycle of stress. So I really encourage you guys to take a second to relax, to take those 5 minute, 2 minute, whatever you have breaks, to step away, take some deep breaths, calm down, take a bath once a week, like put it in your calendar if you have to, put it in your phone, whatever you need to do, because like you can't keep living in that cycle. It's not healthy for you, which means it's not going to be healthy for anyone around you, because this is the type of stuff that leads to us snapping at our kids or getting grumpy with our husband or our wife, or like that type of stuff where whether you're the spouse who's out working a job, or you're the spouse who's home, or you're like half and half, um wherever you need to show up the most, or your divided attention, it's going to hurt all the way around. It's going to hurt you in your home life, your work life. It's just overall going to affect you. It's going to affect your work for God. It's going to affect your family. And so yes, God can use you through anything, but you can partner with him and make sure that you're in a better place to help more, and to do your job really well. I think that's what the Lord calls us to do, as he says, do everything as if you were doing it for the Lord himself. So that means, we want to do it very well. We want to do it to a high standard, because if God came down and said, I have this assignment for you, I need you to go and do this, we would want to do it very, very well. We would want to meet God's standard. And so with that in mind, we should be breaking these cycles that are causing us to, not show up as our best self. So, okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a longer episode because we're already at over our 30-minute mark. So, we're just going to try to get through these last points here and wrap this up, guys. So, recap: exhaustion feels different after trauma. And that's because trauma rewires the nervous system. This is what makes us so exhausted, what makes us so tense, but also because it adds those extra things in there, because we kind of go into survival mode, right? And so it takes the non-necessary parts of our functioning and it just kind of shuts those off. It's like, well, we don't we don't really need this to survive, so we're just gonna turn that off. So, it might turn off your cycles. If you're a woman, it might turn off your ability to coordinate well. Maybe you feel like, I've always been uncoordinated. I was clumsy, couldn't control my body well. I never excelled physically, like in sports or in other areas. And so maybe that's how it showed up for you. It could be really different things. And so understanding that, I think, helps us know what our next step is, because then we're like, okay, well, we need to heal our nervous system. So there's that. And then we also, to go with that, I wanted to talk about the roles of fight, flight, and freeze, because this is the body being in survival mode. As we usually go into one of these, and it can we could be in many of these, like throughout our lifetime, right? It's not necessarily saying that we might only go into one ever, but I feel like most people do tend to pick one of those in a tense situation. So just to briefly go over this, I'm going to give some examples. So, like for fight, your reaction, if you're going into a fight survival mode, would be like aggression, irritability, or the need to control things. Like maybe you always need a sense of control. And then an example of that would be like lashing out during an argument because you feel unsafe or threatened. And then for flight, if you would take more of a flight type of role in your survival mode, it would be a reaction would be like avoidance or running away, literally or figuratively. So it could be like spacing out, or it could be like literally just removing yourself from the physical space. An example of that could be leaving the room or withdrawing emotionally when conflicts arise. And then freeze, a reaction for freeze would be feeling stuck, unable to act or make decisions. And it could be a physical freeze in your body, or it could be a just mental freeze, emotional freeze, where you're like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? Like, so that's how it could show up. And an example of that would be zoning out or feeling paralyzed when faced with stress. And then for fawn, the reaction would be people pleasing or prioritizing others' needs to avoid conflict. And the example would be agreeing to something you don't want to do just to make the peace. So that was the overview for fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And I'm sure just even saying those things, you guys kind of had ideas popping up in your head of when you've acted in those different ways. And so being aware of that just helps us realize like we're normal, we're human, we're not the only ones going through this. So just know that if you are going through this, it doesn't mean like, oh my gosh, you're a horrible person, there's something wrong with you. Like, it means that you're a normal human who experienced trauma, and this is the normal reactions to trauma. So, now that we've gone over that, we'll just wrap up the other few points here. The impact of chronic stress hormone, and we talked about that. With the cortisol is usually the stress hormone that we talk about, and that gets recognized. I'm not sure if there's any other hormones that really play effect with that, but I know that cortisol is like the main one that we talk about. And having high cortisol can affect every area of your health. I mean, it can affect your heart health, it can affect even your weight loss. Like, it's hard to lose weight when you have high cortisol. And there's also, I know adrenaline plays a role in this too, and in your physical and mental fatigue. And so, those are all things to do more research on and maybe even discuss with a doctor or a specialist in this area if you feel like that is something that you're really struggling with. So, and then we talked about muscle tension and the emotional labor that goes along with all this, and how that unacknowledged tension in the body can contribute to your exhaustion. And so, I wanted to throw in here, like, if you notice that you're struggling to sleep a lot at night and you're like, "Oh, I don't have time to take a bath or do this, I need to get to bed because it's hard enough for me to fall asleep." Sometimes I get in those spaces and I push off like the things I know help me because I'm like, I just need to go to bed. But then what happens is, instead of taking that bath, I end up spending the time I would have bathed just tossing and turning. Whereas if I would have took the bath, then I probably would have gotten out and fallen right asleep, and it would have been more beneficial for me. So I really recommend you guys take baths, and if you can add in like some magnesium flakes or Epsom salt. A lot of us are low in that magnesium, and it is what helps the body detox. So I would really recommend that as well. And talk to your doctors about this as too, to see like what they recommend for you. If you're in a place where you can get a full blood panel done and have it analyzed, that is a very blessed place to be. Like, I would really recommend that you take that step if it's available to you, because that's where you can kind of see what's actually wrong with you, instead of them just like doing the normal stuff like taking blood pressure, and looking at like the outside stuff, listening to your heartbeat. Like, that stuff is no is important, um but more so just if you have like a normal condition. But if you're just a normal healthy person, that stuff isn't as important. What you really need to know is what you're deficient in, what your diet is lacking, what's actually going on inside of you. And so getting a full blood panel done and having a specialist look at that could be really great for you. So I really recommend that. And then just to say, like, the bath thing is the example that I gave, but you have to kind of look at your own life and think like, where could I be adding these things in where I've been avoiding them? And so even adding healthy salts into your diet, because they have a lot of those minerals and stuff that the refined salts don't have. And so we like to buy, like, I'll get a bag of the Celtic sea salts, and then we also buy like the kosher salt flakes that have not been like refined and processed through all of that, and they still have some of those minerals. And so I like to put some of the sea salt in my water, and then we use the kosher flakes to cook with. And so that is one way that we've also like looked at our health and put that into our daily habits and routines. And so I really recommend you guys start looking into that stuff and look into your own life and say, where could I add these things in? Where am I being kind of stubborn? And yeah, do some research because there's a lot out there for free too, guys. So look it up. And then, what is a trauma response? I just wanted to go over this so we're very clear. A trauma response is your mind or your body's automatic reaction or response to a situation or experience that feels threatening or overwhelming. And so, this would be like based on past trauma. So, your body remembers whatever you went through that was traumatic for it. So, that could be little t or big T. And if you didn't listen to my last episode, then go back and listen to that. We explained what the difference between those were and all of that. So you don't want to skip, you really don't want to skip anything in this series. You want to go through the whole trauma series step by step if possible, because they build on each other and they do complement each other. So I really recommend you go through the series in order. And so the series, I believe, is starting in episode 11 and going up. So start there if you can. And then a trauma response is shaped by your nervous system, and it often occurs without any conscious thought. It's just your body's way of protecting you. So because of whatever big T or little t you went through in your past, that trauma rewired and reshaped some things in your body. It adjusted to meet the circumstances. And so now moving forward, it sees that trauma, or if it even gets like a glimpse of something similar, it can kind of put up these walls to protect you. And because it's often not a real danger, these walls usually end up hurting us more than they help us because they weren't needed. So that's essentially what we're talking about in this episode and what we are going through that's causing all these things. And why it happens is because, kind of like we just said, the response is triggered. Our survival mechanisms are triggered, and that is the brain, specifically the amygdala's way of protecting you from danger. So the amygdala is like the fear center, you could call it. It's what holds all of those fears, those worries, the defense, the trigger responses from our past big T's and little T's. And so its goal is to protect you, and often because it's trying to protect you, it can actually end up harming you more. And so when we do this type of work, whether you're going to therapy or you are going through coaching, any kind of cognitive behavioral therapy, even, which does show up a little bit in our coaching curriculum. We use a little bit of that paired with the coaching techniques. So that type of stuff really works with the amygdala because that's what's housing all of this. And so if you did experience trauma in your past, your brain and your body might perceive certain situations as threats, even if they aren't dangerous now, which leads to a heightened or inappropriate response. So ways that this can affect your life is it can affect your relationships by creating patterns of conflict or avoidance or disconnection, right? Depending on what your survival trigger is, whether it's fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And then it might contribute to physical symptoms like chronic stress, fatigue, tension, and it can reinforce feelings of being stuck or unable to move forward. And so if you feel like you're just stuck in life, like you want to get to something more joyful, something more streamlined, something that feels more peaceful, easier, less stressful, but you just don't know how to get there, that can be because of these trauma responses and the impact it's had on your life. So that is what we really work with. And so if you are ready to step into a coaching program, we are going to be running our coaching program starting in the next couple months. So I would really encourage you to either apply for a free coaching call or apply for a free day of Voxer coaching so you can kind of get that taste of working with me. And then when I do launch my group um, of first clients for this upcoming session, it's not in a group. I'm going to do it one-to-one, but it might end up getting switched to a group coaching program in the future. But for now, I'm going to do one-to-one with couples. So if you do feel like that's something you might want this year, then I would really recommend you start with the free call or the free Voxer coaching so that I can help you. It doesn't cost you anything, but you kind of figure out, do I like working with her? Does she have real value to offer? And do I want to invest with working with her more? So that is why I offer that to you guys for free, because I don't expect you to make a large financial investment without getting that chance to see what I can do and experience if like our personalities go well together. So something I wanted to throw out there. And then just the last couple things as we wrap up here. The good news is that healing is possible, and I just wanted to make sure that you guys that I'm throwing this in here because I don't want this to be a dreary episode about everything negative. I want you guys to know that I'm doing this. I'm going through this trauma series not to discourage you, but to encourage you and to inform you, because I really want you to be able to make informed decisions on your health, on your mindset, in your family, and even in like what you're going to invest in moving forward to make the changes that need to be made. And if you don't know what changes need to be made because you don't know what's actually wrong, then you're not going to be able to make any change moving forward. And that's why we get stuck, is because we're making uninformed decisions essentially. So the trauma responses can be unlearned, and this can be unlearned through awareness by identifying the triggers and patterns in your reactions. So the first step is to be aware, and then I really recommend you do that by journaling, regularly journaling, and then you can always look back on it too, and that will be extremely helpful for you. Trust me, I've been journaling since 7th grade, and it is like a staple in my life. When I don't journal, like it makes me sad because it really truly helps me get through things, and I enjoy being able to look back at what happened. So the next thing is therapy. If you are in that place where you are struggling to even function, right? So your mental health is so bad that you feel like you can't get through your day to day, or you feel like you might need medication just to get through your day to day. If you've had any type of suicidal idealization, which means like just thinking about it or thinking that it would be nice to die, or anything like that, that's you need to go to therapy. So those are kind of the main things. Like if you feel like I really need to dive into my past, I need someone to help me break it down, I really need medication or someone to help me with these like wanting to die type of thoughts, those are the type of things you should most definitely go to therapy. And it's not to say that if you aren't in that place you couldn't go to therapy, because you can go to therapy at any point. Like we all have stuff to work through. But once you get past that point, I've found personally in my own life that working with a coach was more, it was more beneficial for me, because once I got to that point, I didn't necessarily want to pay someone to sit in a room and talk about my past anymore. I wanted someone to actually help me move forward. And coaching is very forward focused, whereas therapy is a little more past focused. But if you do find yourself in that place where you feel more comfortable with a therapist, for whatever reason, there are some therapists who do invest in getting coaching certifications on top of their education for therapy counseling. So you could look for a therapist who has both and could help you with both, and that might be beneficial for you. Otherwise, you can find a coach like me, or there's plenty others out there who work with people who have had these traumatic experiences and want to grow past that. So the last thing is just leaning on faith and support and leaning on God and your supportive relationships to help you heal and grow. So making sure that, if you have unsupportive relationships, if you have people in your life who are constantly dragging you down, who aren't supporting, you wanting to grow, you wanting to get past where you are right now, then I would maybe consider not keeping those people in your life. And so obviously pray through this, lean on God in every decision, but really like you want to surround yourself by people who are going to support you and encourage you and not drag you back into old patterns and old habits. So I recommend that you pray through that, decide who you want in your circle, and really, really, really lean on God. And then, lean on your friendships, lean on your spouse, um, whoever in your life is like that person for you. So those are my tips to wrap this up. And again, take small steps to calm the body and the mind, grounding, breathing, prayer. It doesn't need to be groundbreaking. Just get a habit of the small things before you try to, step into the larger things, because the small things have more effect than you know if you do them consistently. But often we do them once or twice, or we don't do them at all because we think they're too small to help. And then we don't see that long term effect of doing them consistently every day. So I encourage you, take small steps every day. And then once you have that down, once you've mastered that, then move on to the next thing, right? The bigger things, maybe. So if you are ready to take that next step, and maybe you're just not ready to work with me yet, I would really encourage you to get the anxiety workbook and listen to the private podcast feed and then fill out the workbook to go along with it. And if you are ready for that one-to-one support, or you just want to get a taste of like what really is coaching, I just want to know without having to pay for it, then I recommend you either book a free coaching call or a free Voxer day. If you don't know, our coaching calls are over Zoom. And then Voxer days are over Voxer, which can be used in a web browser or in the app. And it is like a walkie-talkie app. So you can listen in real time, or it is different from a walkie-talkie because after you send the audio message, it saves it and like sends it like a text. So if you aren't in the app while I'm talking, it will just send it to you and you can listen to it later. And it doesn't delete unless you delete it. So you can listen to it over and over again if you need to, and we can also text in there, and I can send you resources through it. So it's the perfect app to do this, and I love it. It's very great for people who are a little more introverted like me, or if your schedule is not very flexible, because then you can kind of get on there whenever it's convenient for you throughout the day instead of having to have like a scheduled one-on-one call with me. So that's why I offer that, because I know I have littles in the house, and I know other people have different work schedules, different situations with their kids, and so I wanted to make it accessible for everyone. So there you go. That is the end of the episode. Thank you for sticking around with me today, and I hope this has been helpful. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you got so much value out of it. And if you loved this episode, could you do me a quick favor and click 5 stars and leave me a review? It would do wonders for spreading the podcast out to other people who need it, and it only takes a few seconds. If you have an additional few seconds, why don't you go ahead and screenshot the episode and share it to your stories so we can spread the message and get more families healed. Thank you, and until next time, I will be praying for you, and I hope you have a blessed day. Bye.